okay, by 2040, how are our members being referred across member organizations? How are organizations coming together to build new products and new ways of engaging with these audiences? How can we almost take that into a world where member organizations are not just sharing learnings, but are sharing members for the value of, the member organization and for the member themselves?
As part of the Stakeholder Impact Forum, we're delighted to present Liam Ward, Director of Venture Cafe London. His approach to building ecosystems with impact is a perfect fit as we connect leaders who are keen to discover new ways to engage members, share ideas, and build communities that last. Liam's a true self-starter and thought leader when it comes to engaging international stakeholders and creating experiences that genuinely resonate with members. From leading the UK's first venture cafe hub in partnership with ARIA to curating innovation gatherings and connecting diverse stakeholders across sectors with startups, entrepreneurs, governments and corporates around the world. His career has been all about making collaboration work. This conversation uncovers some key solutions to challenges around getting members to engage with the why of an organisation, how a personal email can cut through the noise, the way to deliver an 11-star experience for members, and how eating a seaweed packaging innovation can lead to ambassadors who champion your vision free of charge.
And we're lucky today to be joined by Liam Ward, who's spent over a decade building ecosystems across UK, Europe, Asia, and now with Venture Cafe London. He spans across work with universities, government agencies, and entrepreneurs, giving him a unique view of how communities and member organisations can thrive. Liam, it's great to see you today.
Great to be here, Jonathan. Thank you for having me.
If you could start by kind of sharing a little bit about your journey and what shaped your perspective on the kind of ecosystem building.
Yeah, for sure. So my journey probably starts back at university. I studied business at Sussex University and was looking to do a placement year, and everyone went off to do marketing at different big organizations and kind of tread that path. And I really was interested in entrepreneurship and starting my own business. So I pushed the university very hard to try and let me found a business. I had no idea what I was going to found or what I would do. And so they said, right, you need to go to an organization called Sussex Innovation. They work with startups and academic spinouts and will really help to get you a feel for the entrepreneurship landscape and get you some hands-on experience really within startups. So I spent a year, probably 20 years old, working with about 30 or 40 startups throughout 12 months as part of a program set up by Sussex Innovation. And from there, never looked back. I was in the startup community, was in the kind of academic spin-out community, and just got so many life experiences, like career experiences, that made me realize that that was where I wanted to spend my time. And so, yeah, the kind of following 10 years have all been shaped, I guess, by that moment. And what would have been, I guess, an early version of the co-working kind of WeWork model down at Sussex Innovation, kind of connecting academia into the local entrepreneurship scene. That really was the kind of breeding ground, if you like, for the career that I've gone on to have.
So entrepreneurs is kind of an interesting one there because they're a unique kind of mindset. If we talk about stakeholders and connecting stakeholders, what's been your kind of learning in how you kind of connect those, and specifically with kind of larger organizations, member organizations, whether that's governments, universities? Yeah, kind of how have you kind of connected those two together?
Yeah, so following Sussex Innovation, I spent some time at Tech Nation, which is, or was at the time, the UK's, I guess, entrepreneurial support network from kind of pre-seed right the way through to Series B and IPO. And so I think with entrepreneurs, they're a really interesting stakeholder in the sense that everything is immediate, everything has to be high value. And the only thing they can't get back is time, right? They ultimately can get back money, they can get back, other things, but they can't get back the time that they're spending and investing in their business. And so I think from my very early kind of experiences of Sussex Innovation, right the way through to Startup Genome, where we were doing this globally, like time to value for membership organizations or for programs, whatever that is, that's always been one of the key metrics that we've focused on, is how can we get entrepreneurs to experience our community and our values straight away so that they immediately get it. And with the entrepreneurship community, so much of it is learned value through experience. How can we build a cohort of people who are happy to give back to other entrepreneurs? Entrepreneurs need to learn from people who've been there and done it. How do you build a community that is growing and that has an ethos where when you've made it, when you've gone through your journey, how do you give back to other people as well? So yeah, balancing, say, working for a government organization or a government adjacent organization with your customer being an entrepreneur has always been a really interesting line to tread in terms of like moving at the speed of entrepreneurs and reporting to government is, a good balance.
And have you kind of seen any particular, solutions or lessons in that kind of bringing the very different stakeholders into alignment in your work, and specifically kind of for that kind of leader audience that we're talking to here?
I think for entrepreneurs, it's really doing your research and your analysis and your listening, which is, I think, something that you talk a lot about, to what are their actual challenges. Entrepreneurs, we kind of assume that they're this kind of bunch of people that all have the same challenges at the same time. Actually, how do you conduct the research in a very short space of time that gives you the insights and analysis you need to build solutions for entrepreneurs? You can use like user personas, you can use ICPs, whatever it is. I guess, over the last decade, I've spent enough time with entrepreneurs to know their challenges at different stages. But within any cohort, within any membership organization, how quickly can you understand the exact challenges that you want to deliver against, and then the solutions that you can use to solve those problems as quickly as you can? That's the case whether it's entrepreneurs, but it's also the case really for any member organization thinking about its members.
And you've kind of worked, as I say, kind of across the world in these various different industries and sectors. Have you seen any kind of particular differences in cultures and context around stakeholders and around that kind of ecosystem building that you do?
100%. I think, the starkest contrast is probably when we were setting up accelerator programs in Japan. Applying a lot of the same principles to what we'd built community-wise in the UK and in Brighton and in London, assuming that those models immediately apply in Japan. I remember speaking to an entrepreneur in Tokyo who said, my biggest challenge running a company with 25 people is convincing my parents that I should still be doing this, right? Rather than working for a corporate. Like, the cultural startup challenges in Japan are very different to the kind of challenges that you see with entrepreneurs here. And so really, I guess, doing an analysis of the cultural barriers to community is something that we took, really seriously. And we actually worked with somebody out in Japan who helped us on this. It was using the culture map by Erin Meyer to really create an understanding, again, at that deeper level of what do our customers need in different locations. The challenges are the same. They're fundraising, they're hiring, but the way in which you deliver that support is different. And so tools like that gave us a really good understanding of, okay, how do we need to tailor the work that we're doing, let's say in Canada versus Abu Dhabi versus Tokyo? What are the regional challenges that we're going to face here? What are the ways in which people like to communicate, like to receive information? And that then allows us to build communities that look the same. And this is true within Venture Cafe as well, where I'm currently working, and have the same values and the same ethos, but are delivered in a way that is then going to have cut through within the communities that you're building in.
Interesting. I think that's the first time we've heard parents as part of the stakeholder mapping there, of like having to, really having to think about those diverse stakeholders. And you mentioned Venture Cafe there. Do you feel like the challenges you're seeing across the globe for these kind of member organization and stakeholder driven organizations are the same? And if so, what kind of challenges are you seeing, and how is that informing your work at Venture Cafe, particularly in the deep tech?
Yeah, so to provide a bit of background for Venture Cafe, so the organization was founded in 2009 out in Boston. And so a Venture Cafe is a location within a city where we host a Thursday gathering every week for people within the innovation community. So you could be startups, you could be an investor, you could be an academic. If you want to come and hear what is happening within innovation ecosystems around the world, you can always come to a venture cafe and you will find that. So ours runs every Thursday in King's Cross in London, supported by our partner ARIA, which is the Advanced Research and Invention Agency. So really looking at how do we support frontier science within the UK. And so our mission right now is to build effectively the deep tech ecosystem within the UK as part of ARIA. And I think the challenges for member organizations that I guess that apply to us that I also see elsewhere are, and Venture Cafe comes to some of the heart of this, is, you know, post-COVID, we see like massive rise in cases of isolation, right? People had gone through an extreme experience with COVID and are still finding their way on like, what does it mean to reconnect in physical spaces? And what does it mean to re-identify with communities and with cultures, particularly in a world that is becoming more polarizing through social media? And so we see, I think, that like isolation broadly is increasing, but then also when people come to a venture cafe, they have this overwhelming experience of pride in having found a new community. So it's almost like I feel simultaneously that it's the toughest it's ever been to be a member organization, and people are as skeptical as they've ever been. But then the converts are as as driven as they've ever been to kind of find community and to share missions and values and things. So I think that the challenge there is, one, how do you find your people and how do you bring them into those organizations? That's all the classic challenges. And then for us at Venture Cafe, we have a broad yet narrow remit, right? We want to be the innovation community for anyone who's interested in innovation, whether you're looking for a job in a startup or whether you're a partner trying to find deal flow for a fund. But how do you be everything for everyone in innovation, but then specific enough that people want to attend and add enough value quick enough so that people want to come along? So without becoming too narrow for a broader audience. For example, we ran an amazing night on biomaterials a couple of weeks ago, looking at all of the things that are happening in the future of the built world. But what happens if you're like, okay, biomaterials is not for me, maybe that innovation community is not for me. And so I think there's a challenge there really about how do you engage a broad community versus a narrow community? How do you convince people that community is the way that we build out of the challenges that we face? And then what different people, I was reading about one of the previous talks you did with Mo, what the different generations expect from their communities, right? When we're open to everyone, you know, we have people in their 70s come to their event who are like, hey, I've been in tech since, you know, pre-internet. And then you have people who are 18 coming along to our events. How do you then also kind of bring all generations to the table to be able to build organizations that people are proud to associate with?
I mean, that has come up time and time again, the intergenerational demand, specifically in member, you know, traditionally older associations, leadership, usually part of the membership. You know, I think it's a really interesting topic. I'd like to come back to it, but just there, like you mentioned the kind of broad versus narrow. What's your kind of 2 cents on the working groups, you know, women in deep tech, you know, Asian in deep tech? And we've talked quite a lot with leaders of member organizations on this particular subject. Do you think there is benefit to that, or are you kind of more, let's keep the ecosystems for everyone and all try and push forward together?
For sure. So I'm broadly underqualified as a white man to talk about diversity in technology. So I will keep to like sharing the opinions that I've seen of others that really resonate with me. And there was a call on social media recently for people to stop using the phrase femtech because, you know, I am a woman building a technology company, not necessarily a woman building a different style of technology company. You are calling it femtech because I am a woman, but that's not how I want to be perceived or not how investors, etc., should perceive me. So I think there is a broad danger in some of that terminology, but it also is shorthand for what I'm building and is helpful for some people in the industry. So broadly, I think those terms were useful, but are now need to be probably transitioned away from to just, you know, women building technology companies is a normal thing to do within our ecosystem and should be championed in the same way that any good tech company is built. Does that apply for all groups who are looking to find their tribes? No, that's not necessarily true, right? If you're an expat community or you're somebody who's Asian in London, like that can be a really great signifier for you to come and get involved in a community where there's going to be like-minded people. So yeah, it's tough to talk about terms, I think, in like absolutes. I think the one that we struggle with really is like deep tech. And so, okay, if we're defining deep tech, and I was talking to one of our activation partners, Pillar VC, they had a similar thing in green tech. You end up becoming like nothing to nobody when you talk about deep tech, because everyone has already narrowed down into, okay, well, I am AI for science, or I am, you know, quantum. And so suddenly you're saying deep tech, but it doesn't mean anything. So how do you kind of form organizations that attract the right people, but keep the terminology open yet specific? It's a good challenge.
That's a great term. And for Venture Cafe, you know, you mentioned the specifics there, like, so you have something on biomaterials, next week you have something else. How do you then broaden and kind of disseminate that learning? So you've found something really innovative that actually is relevant to a wider audience than the biomaterials. What's your approach to kind of, pushing that out to everyone so that the whole ecosystem can grow?
Yeah, I probably read or listened to Simon Sinek's like Start With Why at like a very formative age. And so a lot of what we do is about like the why of why we're here, the why of why Venture Cafe exists, the mission for what we're trying to achieve. And then really you can hang lots of things off of a mission and values rather than getting super specific. So yeah, for us, like it's about amplification. It's about talking about the amazing things that we see. It's about creating the conditions for finding interesting innovations, much like when we spoke in the pre-call about the founder at Nopla who's doing seaweed packaging that he ate his demo live. Okay, that was relevant for biomaterials, but it's such a great story that I feel compelled to go out and tell people about it. How do we also become, as a community group or as an organization, the kind of voice, if you like, of our mission, and allow people to then hang things off of that mission rather than becoming the biomaterials people. So yeah, it's about capturing, championing, and telling those things to new audiences, and therefore attracting new people into the way we tell our mission and our story and our why.
And I think the why is so important. That comes up time and time again. But then particularly and I think this is a really common thing we're hearing, is for member organizations specifically, what channels work? You know, if you've got this kind of broad, diverse audience of stakeholders, are you seeing any particular channels where you're thinking this is really hitting in how we can get that why across, how we can show everyone the speaker eating his packaging? You know, have you seen anything as a kind of younger organization that's connecting?
Maybe it's because of the kinds of people that we interact with, but we found that LinkedIn has been an incredible way for us to grow that. It's probably like almost a maybe uncool thing to say LinkedIn, but like the people that we are engaging with have broad audiences. We've always used, in all of the organizations that I've pretty much worked in, we've used NPS as a good example of how do you track whether or not somebody loves your brand or not, or your product or what you're experiencing. And so a good measure of that is how many people go to a Venture Cafe and then go on LinkedIn and say, I went to Venture Cafe last night and saw someone eat seaweed. Everyone I know should know about that. And LinkedIn has been a really good tool for us to do that in the first kind of 6 months that we've been running Venture Cafes. I think the other one there is word of mouth. Like, how do you create an experience that is so positive for your members that they want to go and tell their friends? We have a bit of gamification at Venture Cafe where on your name badge, when you come, if you've come for the second time, you get a little number on your badge that says like 2 or 3 or 4. And so what we often see is that you get, as people are coming into the event, there's someone with a number 2 bringing a couple of number ones next to them, right? And they're like, hey, these are my people, and I'm bringing them into the member organization. And I'm now part of almost like an ambassadorial community of people who come more regularly. And so it's like a nice piece of gamification, but it's actually a really strong signifier of, I identify with Venture Cafe and I bring my tribe. That's like that's word of mouth that no amount of marketing spend or no amount of like deliberate tooling is ever going to replace someone going out and vouching for us. And then finally, email marketing, like we direct emails to people who are interested in our events. I send them myself personally as the member organization, and I get people reply to me all the time saying, that's perfect for me. A little bit of personalization still goes a massive way in a world where people are so distracted by like, ads or, marketing spend or TikTok, Instagram, whatever. Attention spans are so short. Someone replied to me the other day saying, I love the way you send these emails weekly that tells me what the next couple of events are from your own personal email. That generates a level of cut through that we basically, I can't find marketing tools outside of LinkedIn or word of mouth that would do that anywhere else.
Absolutely. I think, cutting through the noise is such a common challenge. And it's really interesting to hear, those kind of approaches that you're taking. I think you kind of skirted around it there, but you were talking about the kind of gamification, the LinkedIn. We touched on it earlier, the intergenerational demand, the kind of changing audiences. How do you see people's relationship with membership and community changing?
I am probably biased because I work in community organizations and have done for 10 years and find a lot of purpose in community. We see at the moment at Venture Cafe a real hunger for people coming out and identifying with a community that they can get behind, and feels like a great place to come and meet new people. I think that probably a broader problem that we have seen is that lots of membership organizations are struggling with transactionality, right? How do you get like bi-directional value for both the organization and for other attendees, where everyone is net value add to the conversation, rather than taking away from, hey, I'm going to turn up to this thing. What's the value I'm going to extract? And then I'm going to leave. And so I think for us, we're very conscious of how do we make it so that every single person adds value in this room, whether that is by saying, a student adds value in this room or an investor adds value in this room. Making it a community where everyone is equal has been a way for us to be able to solve some of that transactional challenge. But I think that's probably what I'm seeing from some people's kind of community is based on self-interest rather than actually being part of a member organization where I give as much as I take. And then how a younger, I've been super, super impressed by the amount of young people who are coming to our events and who are, just looking for ways to be parts of communities within, London and within the UK. It gives me a lot of hope for the future and for what we need, because I think community is the only way we build out of some of the challenges that we face. How we then also do that, in the intergenerational demand piece, where different people have different, even just technological experiences of our events, audio challenges, entry challenges, some like in a physical space, they're very real, but then also in an engagement space, how do you make everyone feel comfortable in those environments? That's definitely a challenge. I hope I've answered that in some way there. We can dive into more if you like.
I think it's that kind of, if we look at some of the more traditional member organizations, if we, the kind of bodies that have been around for hundreds of years and have had, decades of members being part of it. And now there's a fear of kind of, these younger generations, the older generations kind of moving out of work and the younger generations coming in. You just said there that you're kind of seeing this hunger, this kind of desire to be engaged and be committed and be belonging into a member organization or community. And I suppose I'm just trying to see what learnings we can get from a kind of younger generation, an organization that's connecting with that younger generation, that these more traditional bodies can kind of see that there is that desire and what they can learn from this younger generation.
Yeah. selfishly, like for survival reasons, like if member organizations don't engage with younger demographics, they're gonna, struggle and die out, right? Like ultimately, what can member organizations provide to younger people is the why challenge of, why have we existed for hundreds of years as a member organization? Well, it's because we've always learned to solve a younger demographics challenges.
Yeah.
And so, yes, the pace of acceleration of change is kind of rapidly increasing compared to 1950 to 1960. Like the last 10 years has looked very different. But if you treat those innovation cycles as things that you have to work through as an organization, attracting younger members who ultimately go on to become the leadership is the lifeblood of any organization, not just member organizations. So, having a strategy for what can we provide to younger members. Your younger member doesn't have to be 18, right? It might mean 30, it might mean 40, it might mean differing audiences in terms of ethnicity or other factors.
Mm.
How we broaden while still being the organization that we want to be and add value to other people. And what they can add to us is always going to be the challenge that I think people need to solve. Organizations are better for diversity. Like it's proven in like FTSE 100 companies, diverse companies and employee bases do better in terms of actual profit generation. How do we then actually go out and build those into member organizations for young people? That's the challenge that we're all working to solve.
Absolutely. And in your experience, you've kind of, we'll go back to the kind of ecosystem building. Obviously, that means like there's an element of balance when you're building these ecosystems, whether that's like inclusivity versus focus, the things we touched on, the broad versus the narrow. I'm quite interested in like your learnings in building those communities that lasted. And then what are the kind of growth opportunities and how do you decide when to kind of broaden out and look into that growth, but still retaining that value that you mentioned right at the top? Why they should be engaged with you if you're going to start kind of growing out there?
Yeah, I think to be fair, this is not always something that the organizations I've worked with have got right. For example, the word for organizations where ultimately the funding for the projects is no longer continued. And that's because the focus was so narrow, but the value generation was so high. And so there's a learning there of we were serving, 30 founders a year, or we were serving, 15 founders a year in different places on different programs. And, the value was amazing. The WhatsApp groups still go off 10 years later of founders supporting each other saying, oh, I've got this challenge. This has been such a great community for me. But there's no financial value there for the organization anymore because the target audience was too small. That is definitely a problem that I think we need to, you have to solve the like broad versus narrow debate. And then I think we talk about engaging sustainably with our member organization at all of our events. We kind of say at the beginning, we've got a credo that's, be inclusive, be sustainable, have fun. Within, I guess, be sustainable there, that is obviously in the way you engage with the building and the event, but be sustainable in what you give, what you take, and what you expect from the member organization. Like really clearly, I worked with a great, boss at Technation back in the day who almost every call started with like a recap of the values, right? Of like why we were running this program and who it was for. Within the sustainability value here for us is like a repetition of making sure that everyone understands the values of what we're trying to build so that they can do that sustainably for our team, for our speakers. Like everyone is ultimately giving time and giving energy to a community. Do that in a way that is respectful and sustainable, or we will all burn out by Christmas and won't be here, right? Like, how do we make sure that everyone is able to do this for the long haul? And I think that's, part of, Venture Cafe's mission and vision is how do we do something that's still running in 5 years' time? In the innovation community? Well, that is around people being inclusive, making trade-offs that like benefit everyone within the ecosystem rather than optimizing for one goal and getting there straight away.
I'm interested in the digital space. How are you keeping active and kind of, vibrant communities alive in the digital world, which I think is something that a lot of organizations are struggling with these days?
Yeah. brilliant question. Not one that we have directly addressed yet, but one that Venture Cafe has addressed outside of London. And so a lot of that is around building tooling, whether that's Slack or apps, to help people to connect around the challenges that they're facing outside of a Venture Cafe, and then giving them some form of programming around the events that we run so that there is touch points for them to be able to get value and to add to the community without having to come to the in-person spaces. Our mission really is around in-person spaces. But when you look at, say, Startup Genome, for example, that was all around how do you build an accelerator program in Tokyo, but ultimately I'm doing that from London. So what are the tools that we can use to create value from speakers all around the world and communities all around the world, but actually do that in different locations remotely? So I'm sure we're all in lots of Slack communities, we're all in lots of different tools, but WhatsApp has been incredibly effective for us in terms of creating the immediacy of communication that we need with our members, but also the personal nature of that. Now that comes with lots of trade-offs, right? Like having someone on your phone all the time who can message you at I'm part of a founder community that went off at like midnight on Friday night the other day. And so having to have like the right tooling in place and the right, again, like thesis and structures in how we communicate as a community and a member organization is really valuable. But things like Slack, things like WhatsApp, things that enable people to feel really personally connected to each other, they've always been the ones for digital native organizations like the ones I've worked for that's where our customers are, or our end users are. And so that's where we've ended up, building online communities that then meet in person as well.
Absolutely. And I think it's interesting there you said about, you mentioned Japan at the beginning of the conversation. You've mentioned they're outside of London. Is there anything that you've seen as a kind of solution that you think, that's something that we've not kind of touched upon?
Yeah, well, not for any of those, but I think there are learnings to come. I think from like Discord and Twitter Spaces that were going around for a little while. I think how people engage in a way that goes beyond written communication, but isn't sitting on a Slack call or on a kind of Zoom call. I think if we talk about like digital nativeness for new member organizations, okay, young people, how do you go and meet those people where they are and in the spaces that they're in? Different forms of getting people together are really interesting. We used to use a platform, I can't even tell you the name of the platform now, but during COVID, where everyone had an avatar and you moved around the room and you networked with each other. Those are the kinds of explorations where, go and speak to your community. Ultimately it comes back to like understanding what value people want, but go and try and innovate on some of those new things where actually Discord might be the way to go. Different networking platforms might be the way to go. I've always lurked in some of those spaces, but never used them myself. I think there's some value in that. I think for us, in terms of like communities and people who do it really well, like Y Combinator have almost like a frenzied approach to their kind of community that people try to get into. Obviously, some of that is based around their investment terms, but building communities where people are really proud to be a member organization. I think there's lots to learn from all of those.
And just kind of keeping on that feeling, you mentioned Nilam Paris, that whole ethos of design things that are better, 10 times better than people's previous experiences. What kind of forum do you think, and what kind of takeaways do you think, where we could, as an ecosystem of member organizations, really be thinking that, 10 steps ahead? We spoke with the head of Faceta, and he said, people that are building cars, working on the mobility industry, they're already thinking about 2040. They're not living in 2025, they're living in 2040. What's your kind of blue sky vision for where we're heading and how we can kind of think those 10 steps ahead?
That's a
big
question. So that's a great question. So for context, Nilam Paris was the growth director at TransferWise for a long period of time, and I watched him give a talk where their theory on building Wise and all products generally was build something that is 10 times better than the current product and the experience, and you will be well on your way to success. But that's what you need to be able to shift markets and to shift visions for people. It's kind of like the Airbnb do a similar thing. They're like, what's the 11-star experience of Airbnb? It's where the founder comes and lets you in your Airbnb personally. Someone gives you a guide to the city. You have the best holiday of your life. That was where they started, rather than just starting from like a rental platform. And that's where you see Airbnb build into that product today. I think for member organizations, it's generating that feeling, like what is the 11-star experience for your member organization and how do you build that? For the community of member organizations, I think it would probably be a utopia where like member organizations are able to share members, right? And to share values and visions. You know, you've got an amazing piece of work going on here across the forum. Okay, by 2040, how are our members being referred across member organizations? How are organizations coming together to build new products and new ways of engaging with these audiences? We think about Venture Cafe as a community of communities. So anybody, we had 5 partners the other night bring their communities together under one roof of community around the topic. Like, how can we almost take that into a world where member organizations are not just sharing learnings, but are sharing members for the value of, you know, the member organization and for the member themselves. So that's probably a bit of a broader vision. Technology wise / opportunity wise, yeah, TBC on that one. I'll do some thinking and come to the next forum.
And I suppose there you kind of mentioned the forum, but are there any particular topics that you and, you know, kind of work with Venture Cafe that you're kind of really, the challenges are something that you're kind of thinking about a lot, and you want to kind of try and learn from other member organizations, other thought leaders who have already solved that problem? What are the kind of topics you'd like to hear more about?
Yeah, I think we are very lucky that we do in-person events, so people get a warm, fuzzy feeling from coming in person. If you were solving these challenges on a broader basis for remote communities, I would be very interested in how you leave people feeling fuzzy after a Zoom call when they're potentially sat in their bedroom. I think that's like a very valid challenge for member organizations, is how do you create that same level of warmth or engagement remotely and consistently over time? We've tried platforms, but would love to connect on the tooling and those pieces there. I think ultimately, I mentioned earlier, like community is the way in which I feel like we'll build our way out of this. And member organizations, I'm probably a member of a couple of organizations that I like associate with. I just see them as very important to our like national challenges, economic challenges, whatever we're currently suffering with. So I think also a broader understanding of how we elevate and apply maybe some tech principles to building member organizations, right? Like if I was to say to some people, we're doing a chat about member organizations, people might think like stuffy golf club kind of stuff. And I say that as a golfer, so don't worry. You know, how do we apply like some of those like principles that I've mentioned about like Neeland, for example, or Airbnb? How do we apply those experiences to member organizations so that it becomes as valuable and I guess ultimately proud to be associated with those organizations as we would feel about users of other technologies or about other products in that same way. So yeah, I guess it's an advancement in all areas of the quality of member organizations so that ultimately they survive in future.
Absolutely. And if you had one piece of advice for leaders of member organizations that are struggling with kind of value and engagement of their members, what would it be in 2025?
I'm a big believer in like the user persona and user feedback like journey, right? Like so many people, it's so easy in all walks of life or in any product development to sit down and just be like, I know what our community need because I am the leader of this community. I'm guilty of it all the time. My team pull me up on it brilliantly all the time. Actually, one of the benefits we get every Thursday is live feedback in the room on what we're doing well or badly. Get your users in a room, get them sat down, try and do a broad demographic spread and say, like, you tell us what the future of this organization is and how it feels for you as a user, and then we can build an organization and a service and a product from there. Co-build the why, co-build the future with your members. And from there, like, it's a much easier place to start. And the answers will surprise you, and might not be the ones that you had in your plan. That's a much better place to start from, that because the community know what they want, rather than trying to build, taking things to market, and then being shocked when it doesn't quite resonate as well as you thought it would.
Fantastic. And I mean, that leads perfectly onto, as a stakeholder in the Stakeholder Impact Forum, what is the why for you? Why are you joining this forum as an individual?
Yeah, I'm really excited to learn from other people who are building other organizations that have large membership bases. I'm excited by the guests you've already had on. I'm excited by the future guests that you are going to have on. I'm excited to hopefully meet some people in person. And I think, lots of the organizations that we work with are member organizations in some way. Like, any product is a member organization. But we're very lucky to be surrounded by, tens, dozens of member organizations that I'd love to refer to you. Those people coming together and sharing knowledge. Maybe it's because it's what I've delivered for entrepreneurs for 10 years. Like, I see that being a need for people who manage member organizations. And typically it's an amazing community of people doing incredibly hard work and some of the best people I've ever met have been in those roles. So yeah, knowing more of those people and learning more from them would be, I think, brilliant for the community.
Liam, thank you so much. There was so much detail today, and it was really interesting as a kind of to have an expert in ecosystem building, where I think that is one of the key topics that is coming up time and time again. So thank you so much for your time and your insights.
Not at all. Jonathan, thank you for having me, and speak to you soon.